Welcome to Crimson Hollow, a place where magic is real. My name's Courtney, and I'm the artist/developer behind this project. I'm making a cozy fantasy game about a mysterious town that's hidden from the rest of the world. Crimson Hollow is still in development, but is available now for wishlisting on Steam. Today I'll be sharing my development process with a special focus on art and visual design. You'll see how I turn my sketches into game environments with movement, life, and just a little bit of magic. Crimson Hollow is a hand-drawn game, which means everything you see in the game's environment is a 2D drawing that I've created in Photoshop. I don't use 3D modeling software like Blender for creating environments. In fact, all the art I make begins as a simple sketch on an isometric grid. Some game assets take longer to draw than others because of their size or complexity. Some assets even require animations, which comes with its own difficulties. But out of all the art I've made so far for Crimson Hollow, the biggest and possibly most challenging game asset I've ever created has to be the player's home. They say home is where the heart is, so as the heart of the player's experience, I really wanted the home to encourage creativity and role-playing. Some players may want to role-play in a dark, mysterious home, while other players want something more overgrown and whimsical. And the only way to give players this kind of freedom of design was by creating a customizable home from the ground up. Over a year ago, I created the first player home design, and at the time, I made the kind of cozy home I would want to live in as a player. I got a lot of great feedback about that first cottage, but there was still room for improvement. The next cottage needed to be bigger and better, with cleaner line art and endless customization options. After some planning, I was able to sort home customization into 5 main categories: walls, roofs, trim, windows, and doors. Thanks to my earlier designs, I'd already laid some solid groundwork, but I still had a lot of ground to cover. I began the process in Photoshop by laying down the construction lines for the base house. As you can see, I'm using a grid on a layer below my drawings. I always use the same isometric grid to ensure that all game assets in Crimson Hollow are drawn at the same angle. As a reference, I scaled up the size of the original cottage and placed it on a layer above the grid. After completing the base cottage, it was time to add in the customization options like different doors, windows, and roof shapes. This part required some organization to make sure the different parts of the home were seen on the correct layers. It was also important that I named and grouped layers very carefully so that things would be less confusing for me later when I would bring the cottage into Unity. As you can see, the only colors I'm using on the cottage are very light or near white tones. This is because I want to be able to adjust the colors of the cottage when I bring it into Unity later. Images in Unity can only go darker than its existing color. It can never go lighter. So for example, if I import a red image into Unity, I can only make it a darker red. But if I import a white image, then I can make it any color I want. There may be another workaround for this through code, but this was the simplest approach for me as an artist. So I trusted the process and treated the cottage like a monochromatic painting, using mostly one color, which was white. You'll notice I'm using very light hues of pinks, yellows, and blues in certain parts of the cottage. This is called hue variation, which creates visual interest and is a stylistic choice I like to use for all the assets in Crimson Hollow. References also play a huge part in my creative process. I'll use any image online that inspires me, but my favorite references are of dollhouses and miniatures. This part of the process was a lot of fun, but also took a long time, as I soon became completely absorbed in creating as many customization options as I could think of. By the end, I created 2 roof types, 6 windows, 6 doors, and additional accents such as blemishes, bricks, plants, and roof turrets. Throughout this process, I imported several test versions of the cottage into Unity, just to make sure I didn't come across any unexpected issues. My only concern was that there were too many layers in the file, which made things a little chaotic. So after combining some layers, I trimmed the cottage down to 41 layers within 6 groups. If you'd like to download the full Photoshop file of the cottage, it's available on my Patreon. Soon the cottage was ready for Unity, and I imported the file in a large Photoshop document format so that it would retain all of the layers I'd organized earlier. Then I created a very basic user interface to handle cottage customization, sorting the decoration menus into the 5 categories I mentioned before. Each button in the menus has a cottage editor script attached to it. What this script does is it gets the sprite renderer component on a game object and sets it to a predetermined color. So, for example, the brown roof button gets the sprite renderer of the roof and changes it to the color brown when the button is clicked. With this logic in place, color possibilities became endless. After cottage customization was working, there was still something else the player home needed to come alive, and that was movement. It's easy for top-down games to appear flat and lifeless, especially when there is minimal movement happening. Besides the falling snow and the moving player, there wasn't any other life happening on screen. To fix this, I started by creating some winter plants that I could animate to simulate the movement of wind. I used skeletal animations to make the flowers move, which involved adding bones to the different parts of the flower, and then using Unity's animation tool to record the flower moving. Animating the trees was a little bit more complicated because I didn't want the trunk to move with the leaves, so I kept the trunk as a separate game object. I think this should come in handy later on down the road if I ever add seasonal changes to the game. This is because if I change the color of the white leaves, it won't affect the trunk. And as you've seen before, changing the color of a white image in Unity is pretty simple. My favorite thing to animate was a waterfall. This was done entirely in Photoshop. I don't have formal training in hand-drawn animation, but I found that I really enjoyed this process. It actually took me an entire day to draw all of the different layers and frames of the animation, but the entire process was extremely satisfying. It's been a while since I made hand-drawn animations, and creating this waterfall helped me remember how much fun it can be to step outside of my artistic comfort zone. Despite the challenges and the time invested, seeing all of these elements come to life in the game filled me with immense satisfaction. As development continues, I look forward to sharing more of Crimson Hollow's world. Now, if Crimson Hollow seems like your kind of game, or if you just want to support an indie developer, please consider adding the game to your Steam wishlist. This small action goes a very long way in helping the game get discovered by new players. And while you're there, you can also check out the 30-second teaser trailer, which is currently only available on Steam. Before we wrap things up, I'd like to give a special shout out to the Roaring Newt, a very talented artist who created a beautiful diorama of the first player's cottage. They actually modeled it in Blender, printed it out, painted it, and even gave it lights and smoke. Their work is absolutely stunning, so please go check out the entire video. Next, I'd like to take a moment to express my deepest gratitude to the Lunar patrons for their unwavering support. Your contributions are helping so much to fund the development of Crimson Hollow. I also want to recognize the musicians, writers, and artists who have enriched our Discord community through their participation in our monthly character design challenges. Your creativity and passion continues to inspire me. Looking ahead, I'm excited to share that our upcoming community challenge starts in July. The official prompt will come out on July 1st on Discord. But as always, everyone is welcome to participate, including, but not limited to, 2D and 3D artists, writers, musicians, and all creators. Thank you all once again for being a part of my journey. Your support and enthusiasm fuels my dedication to bringing Crimson Hollow to life. Stay tuned for more updates, and I'll see you in the next video.